We hoped it would be a blockbuster in Paris. It always was probably the fixture that we circled when the draw was kind of made and looked at when they were going to be playing each other. One that we were probably the most excited by, defending champions, number one team in the world. And Charles, we got a belter, didn't we? I mean, it sort of had everything that you would have wanted that game to have, I think.
We absolutely did. I mean, there are very, very few criticisms that I can level at the game as a whole, taking all the different elements that we would dissect and digest. I thought Ben O'Keefe, the referee's job nowadays is very, very difficult, and I know he's had copped a lot of flack. I think that just happens now in big games. I just think that is, that's just par for the course now. But personally, I really think that at the minute, with the state that rugby union's in, if the referee is not deciding the outcome of the match, if there's not deciding the result, then I think they've probably had a good game, and I don't think Ben O'Keefe decided the result of that game. I was happy with his performance. I think there's probably a couple of things that he might think that he got wrong, but that's probably the case in every single rugby match that's ever taken place. And the two teams themselves were phenomenal. You looked at Ireland. Ireland looked a bit shell-shocked in the first 10. South Africa came storming out the blocks. The line-out went completely to pieces. Ireland's line-out went completely to pieces. But then they shored everything up, and that is a sign of a good team, isn't it? Backs on the ropes, shoring it up, finding a way to win, and actually not just sort of grinding out a victory either. They say that sort of good teams can win even when they're playing poorly. Well, this wasn't even the case. They still played well. They played some lovely rugby. We had Sexton's timing of the pass to Aki often at 12 was just sublime. Like, it couldn't have been better. And I mean, you're looking at Aki against Dale Ende there, and I mean, Dale Ende played one of his best matches for a good while, and even so was still sort of outplayed by Aki. It was an awesome contest, and if we saw it again, I don't think anyone would be unhappy.
Really interesting point on the refereeing. So I bumped into a bit of a clang here. I bumped into Aled Walters at Lille Station on my way back, and one of the first things he said was, "What do you think of that last maul turnover?" And I actually said to him, I mean, I probably made a bit of an idiot of myself, but I said to him, well, the thing about playing the box, isn't it, is that all of those contest areas are so ferociously contested that you sort of can be wrong both ways or you can be right both ways. And I didn't realise I'm chatting to a guy that coached the box to the last World Cup, and then I sort of realised at the end of my point, like, you know that better than me. But no, I agree with you. I think you're always going to be able to catalogue a load of things that referees do wrong in games, because that's the nature of it, especially more so it's heightened when South Africa are a team there's an amazing clip, I think, from the Chasing the Sun documentary where Rassie Erasmus says, I don't want you to get into 80 contests and win 60, I want you to get into 100 and 120 and win 90. And with every player on the pitch doing that in that mindset, then it's absolutely going to be difficult for those officials. And I thought O'Keefe put himself in a good position to get a big knockout game later on in the tournament. What I found about the game, sort of more so, was thinking about it in the context of the whole tournament, and I kept thinking back to South Africa losing the first game of the last World Cup against New Zealand, and now almost more so that because they've won the last one, they're a team that won't be too downhearted about losing a game that essentially it does matter because they get France rather than New Zealand, but it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. They've still got to keep winning all the way to the final. And I think those subplots, so they didn't maul hardly at all until the end. They're 100% doing that in more important games. There's just a few wrinkles. They won't go 7-1 again, I don't think, just because they'll give themselves a little. Certainly Pollard will come back into their gun 23 and they'll give themselves a little bit more leeway, because with the 7-1, they couldn't change up their back line at all until the end because that's too much of a risk. I just found it really, really interesting knowing that those sides knew that they could probably meet again.
Yeah.
Because, and if you talk about South Africa's missed kicks off the tee, you have to talk about Ireland gaffing their line out. There are things that both sides will know that they can improve, and that's what's so exciting.
That's the curse of the Telegraph Rugby podcast, the line out, because we bigged it up against how it went against Tonga and how effective it was to launch all their attacking moves, and they lost the first 4, didn't they? Which was a bit of a mess.
Absolutely. And on the goal kicking, I've written about this. I don't know when it will be published, but it should be published this week, or if not today, for you guys to read. Manny Libbok obviously missed 5 points. 5 points from the tee. Faf de Klerk, admittedly from long range, lost 6. But Manny Libbok played beautifully at fly half. Rassie Erasmus made this point in the post-match interview. about how excellent he was, and people who were saying that Andre Pollard should have started. Well, Erasmus made the point that A, he wasn't 100% fit, and B, how do you know that with how well Libbok played with the ball in his hand, how do you know that we would have got to those positions to win those penalties, to win those kickable penalties if Pollard had played? We might have been losing by more. You can't say, oh, the goal kicker's lost us the game because he missed 6 points. That just doesn't work. It's just basic chaos theory. There is so many other variables at play. Who's to say if Libbok had kicked those 3 points that Ireland wouldn't have gone down the other end and scored a try? You just can't. You can't boil it down to that. There is no shame. There is no shame whatsoever for South Africa, for the Springboks, to come within 5 points and 5 metres of beating or not losing to the world's number one ranked team in the pool stages of the World Cup. They won't be down. They won't be sort of dispirited by that at all, I don't think.
No, I think that's fair. I think you're kind of pleased in some ways if you're both sides, because there's stuff there that you can rectify within time for the knockout stages when it really matters. At the same time, I don't think there was too much damage to either team off the top of my head in terms of injuries or knocks. I just wanted to mention Andrew Porter's performance. I thought he was fantastic for Ireland, and the way he's one of many players who've kicked on in the last two sort of 3 years within this team. They play such an efficient brand of rugby, Ireland, and he's certainly a big part of that with how he contributes from a ruck clear out and a carrying and attacking perspective. And he went 75 minutes, I thought, as well.
Scrum pretty well
really
as well.
Good. I thought he was one of the standout performers.
And what about that James Lowe tackle on Etzebeth as well? While we're talking about sort of standout performance, I mean, he's just
James Lowe's defence, full stop. He got a jackal turnover, didn't he?
Yeah,
at one
early
point.
on.
That was obviously a big work on for him. I think he's been totally kind of open about saying that, and he was out of the side briefly because of that. We were led to believe. So yeah.
Read a stat before the game. That's his first time he's played South Africa as well, which is quite cool. Like quite a nice way to get off the mark. I just wondered if it changed anything you felt about in terms of eventual winners of this tournament, and whether watching South Africa wobble slightly but not majorly, or Ireland putting away South Africa with kind of a statement World Cup win in a way, whether that had made you, Charlie, feel a bit differently about who might win it all.
It made me think Ireland are more likely to now, although having been on the South Africa bandwagon for a long time, the only way it dented it, I think, was the hooker situation, and how I think if I was one of those scrum halves, I'd be worried in training, because I think as soon as one of those, if there's a hint of an injury to one of those, we might see is Joseph Dweba would be the next cab off the rank, because I just think that gives them a little bit more solidity. But then again, the South African coaching team is he's been around the block. They're extremely streetwise, and they'll know various ways as to how they can get over the line. So I'm still high on South Africa, but I'm a little bit higher on Ireland.
And to be fair, Dion Forey, when he came on, he was 3 from 4 with his line-out 3.
And the one he missed was a pretty tough. I mean, you're getting away with that a lot, aren't you?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. It was harsh. I think that after having watched that, I'm slightly more scared for France in the quarters, especially as we'll come on to maybe without Dupont. I think that South Africa looked frighteningly physical, and I think France without Willemse, maybe without Marchand, maybe without some of their starting forwards, they could get a little bit bullied up front. And when France don't have it all their own way, when they can't get this incredibly quick front foot forward momentum, that's when they've struggled. Previously, you look at that Scotland win in the 2021 Six Nations, where Scotland managed to stop them at source. That's where France have trouble, when they can't get really quick ruck ball, when they can't get Dupont singing around the fringes. That's when they struggle, and I think that South Africa have the pack and the physicality even behind the pack to do that.